The title of today's chat is Forest Bathing and Depression. I want to talk about the work of a Professor Qing Li. Dr. Li has been widely published over the last 20 years or so and has written really interesting articles in publications in New York and in other places throughout the world. For the last few decades, he's been doing some very interesting work in Japan. One of his areas of research has been looking into causes of depression and anxiety amongst businessmen. A lot of you probably will realize that Japan is a suicide capital of the world. And also there's a very interesting culture and work ethic over there. People work tremendously long hours and they work at frenetic paces, and there's a lot of pressure on people to be the perfect workers. And this creates a lot of stress and anxiety. Some people attribute this to the high levels of suicide among males in Japan. Certainly a lot of pressure is put on Japanese men socially to perform at the highest levels for very long periods of time. Professor Li started out by looking at the therapeutic benefits of taking groups of men into the forests in Japan and seeing the effects this had on their depression and anxiety. Over the years, this has turned into somewhat of a movement, with literally millions of people now adopting this technique that he calls forest bathing. Over the years, with different groups, he's actually measured physiological responses to stress after taking these groups of people into the forest. And what he's found is dramatic reductions in things like heart rate and other markers for stress. A common myth that we make in the area of depression and anxiety is we start to hide out because we can't face life. So we think that by tucking ourselves away and disengaging will give us levels of comfort. We have this fear of getting out and engaging. There's some very serious mistakes that we're making around doing this. Many of those things that we know that help depression and anxiety, by doing this, we're not accessing them. There's probably a lot of different reasons for this forest bathing being so effective. I think we can assume that there's some consistent mechanics. We know that vitamin D, which comes from sunlight, has a direct effect on depression and anxiety. We know that engaging with communities and engaging with other people leads to great value in mental health. So going into the forest with groups of people supplies this connection that unfortunately many societies are lacking. We can also assume that by doing this, people are raising their level of physical activity, and we know that better blood flow increases all sorts of physiological things which help depression and anxiety. Another significant point of this is that it dramatically breaks certain patterns of behavior. By taking these groups into the forest, they're totally breaking their traditional patterns, which are being locked in these work environments, going home and repeating everything over and over again. There's a wealth of research on being mindful or being in the moment and taking your mind away from past events and future events, just being at one, being in the moment. And my feeling is that being in the forest certainly helps with this. Not only are there dramatic reductions in the physiological markers for stress, but almost overwhelmingly, the majority of these people have dramatic improvements in their mental health when different types of scales for depression and anxiety are used. Some other people suggest that there are very interesting electromagnetic components to why this is effective. And if we think about it, some of our organs do rely on electromagnetic currents. This is why we have EEGs for our brains, or ECGs, which pick up the electrical activity in our hearts. There's some quite interesting papers around the interference that we can get from modern technology, which can cause disruptions to these natural electric patterns that we have throughout our bodies. Some people suggest that connecting with nature and being in the vicinity of lots of trees can actually have a positive effect on our electromagnetic impulses that go throughout our bodies. The science on this is a little bit harder to find. So the message behind this conversation is whatever the actual reason for the benefits behind doing something like this, engaging with nature can have profound benefits. Getting out has a whole host of positive results on your body. The other takeaway message is that some of these apparently simple solutions can have a dramatic effect. If you or somebody you know is suffering from some kind of mental health disorder, especially anxiety and depression, you have to resist that natural impulse to stay inside and isolate. And the way forward is to fight this and get outside and get amongst nature. Thank you for listening to today's chat, and please share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. And I look forward to chatting to you again very soon.